2020 legislative session of the Penfield Town Board. I'll officially call this meeting to order. In the auditorium tonight, I have Councilman Moore, Town Clerk Steckloff, and Development Director, Mr. James Costello. They'll lead us in the pledge. If you'd please rise. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I'll ask our clerk to please call the roll.
Draw. Here. Cole.
Here.
LaFountain.
Here.
Moore.
Here.
Akadin.
Here.
Okay, thank you. Before we start in this evening with our public hearings, I want to just make sure that everyone is aware of the following notice that we have posted at the Town Hall, the Town Clerk's bulletin board, and on our outside doors. Due to COVID-19 virus and the closing of the town operations consistent with the Governor's executive orders, the July 15th, 2020 Town Board legislative session is being held remotely via Zoom. This meeting will also be video recorded and broadcast live via the town's website, that's penfield.org, on the town's government access channel, that's 1303, and on streaming media device, Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire. You may search Penfield TV in your device's app store, and it's a free app. The meeting will later be transcribed. Questions tonight regarding video coverage, please contact Penfield TV at 340-8661. And if you'd like to address the board on any matter, there are two public participation opportunities, one in the beginning of the agenda and one at the end of our agenda. You may participate by phone at 340-8771 or by electronic submission at penfield.org. So with that, this evening we'll start in. We do have two public hearings, and I'll ask our clerk to please read the legal for the first public hearing.
Consider a subdivision of property at 2105 5 Mile Line Road located in the Four Corners zoning district. The legal notice was published in the Penfield Post on June 25th, 2020, posted on the town website and town clerk bulletin board. 29 postcards were mailed.
Thank you very much. I'll ask our town attorney, Mr. Richard Horowitz. Mr. Horowitz, is this properly before the board?
Yes, it is.
Thank you very much, Mr. Horowitz. With that, we'll move on. And do we have...
Mr. Hatch.
Okay, Mr. Hatch should be joining us this evening. And while we're bringing him in, I'll ask Mr. Costello to just take just a moment and do a quick intro as to what this is. And then from there, we'll speak to the applicant.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. Shortly, we'll have Mr. Robert Hatch with us, who will give you an explanation of the technical aspects of this application. But short and sweet, the intent is last year, as you remember, or actually 2 years ago now, Dr. Greg Merkley, requested subdivision approval from this board to allow him to develop his dental office on the corner of Liberty Street and 5 Mile Line Road. That left two buildings on the parcel. There was the homestead, Covey Vanderzell homestead, and also the Bangs Hair Salon. And the owners of the Bang Hair Salon are requesting subdivision approval so that they may own that property themselves and be separate of the Vanderzell home. With that, I will let Mr. Hatch give his presentation.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Costello. Mr. Hatch, are you with us, sir?
Yes, I am.
Great, welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Bob Hatch. I'm a land surveyor with Schultz Associates, Engineers and Land Surveyors. Here representing Four Corners Penfield Collateral, the owners of 2105 5 Mile Line Road, which is Lot 1 of the GAM subdivision that was approved back in 2017. Basically, it's about a half an acre parcel. My client has entered into an agreement with the tenants of Bangs Hair Salon, which is the one-story frame building on the west side of the property. Basically, what they'd like to do is to sell that to them so that they are fee owners of that parcel. and the remaining portion of the land would stay with Four Corners Penfield collateral. And part of this subdivision is that back in 2017, when this originally happened, there was a maintenance agreement that was put in place between the original Lot 1 and Lot 2 between GAM Real Estate and Four Corners Penfield. That agreement is being modified, and I have submitted a copy of that to Mr. Costello for a review. My understanding is that all three parties that are potentially going to be involved have agreed to it. So that's the basic, the nutshell of what our project is. If anyone has any questions, or if the public has any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Great. Thank you, Bob, for that overview. I'll ask the board, are there any questions for Mr. Hatch or for Mr. Costello on this particular subdivision application?
I guess we would ask Jim, is there any concerns that the town might have? It sounds cut and dry listening to this, but are there concerns? Have you talked about it at the project review committee?
Project Review Committee did review the project. There were no concerns of a technical nature. Comment was made to Mr. Hatch that we would have to have a revised maintenance, parking, and access agreement. He immediately had that resolved. We do have the document. It's pretty much mirrors the original document that was recorded at the county clerk's office, but I am going to have Mr. Horowitz look at that just to make sure he's comfortable with it before we move forward with it.
So I think it's safe to say that everything that we see on the site today, with the exception of the modification of the easement or cross-access easement or maintenance agreement, everything will remain the same. There are no changes to buildings proposed. There are no changes to parking lot, driveways, anything like that. This is an opportunity, I think, as Mr. Hatchett indicated, to separate the parcel so that that can be acquired by Bangs. With that, I'll ask board, any other questions either for the applicant or for Mr. Costello? Yes, Deb?
Mr. Supervisor, thank you. Either, I guess, from Mr. Hatch or Mr. Costello, I see that I know the agreement with the shared agreement with the shared parking. Are there any designated? Is there designated parking that actually comes with this property?
That's a good question, Debbie. There are parking spaces adjacent to the structures that they've been using for their own use, their own purposes, but they are entitled to share each other's parking spaces if need be.
But I guess, so getting further, so if they ever were to choose to sell this property again, they could sell this property with parking spaces already. They wouldn't have to necessarily come back and make an agreement with the rest of the parcel?
Well, the agreement that they're prepared to sign will run with the land. It'll apply to their successors and heirs. So this will be an ongoing process for anybody who buys the property.
That's my main question.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yep, thank you.
Okay. All right, board, any other questions? We'll let the record show that a short environmental assessment form was made part of this application, and that is part of the record, as well as the information in their letter of intent for this property, as well as a site map that I think Mr. Costello has had up on the screen. I'll ask the board any additional comments, board, on this particular matter. Okay, at this time I'll ask, and I'm just checking my computer here. I do not see anyone that has called in on behalf of this application. I'll ask Mr. Costello. Mr. Costello, is there anything additional you would like to add to this application that we haven't either already received or discussed this evening?
No, I think it's just a process now. If the board is amenable to approving it, we'll go through the approval process where they have to have the plan signed off and recorded at the county clerk's office.
Okay. And I'll recognize Mr. Hatch. Mr. Hatch, any additional information that you would like to provide the board on this particular application that we haven't already heard this evening?
No, I have nothing to add.
Okay, thank you, sir. Let's talk about next steps. The next opportunity for the board to discuss this matter will be next Wednesday at a work session. That's July 22nd. That's when the board will take a look at all the materials that have been submitted, as well as any comments made at this public hearing. And if the board believes that no additional information is needed, the board could recommend to staff to draft a resolution. That resolution would be prepared and submitted for the August 5th legislative session of this board. You're welcome to join in on that meeting. That will be another Zoom meeting, Mr. Hatch, if you want to listen to any of that discussion at the work session. Or you can feel free to give Mr. Costello a phone call the next day to find out how the board ruled on this particular application.
Yes, I'll probably plan on attending that meeting.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Great,
All
thank
right, one last check. I do not see any calls coming in at this time. And seeing no further information on this particular application, I'll declare this public hearing closed. Thank you very much for everyone that participated. And again, Mr. Hatch, it looks like we'll see or hear from you next Wednesday.
Great, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, sir. Okay, we will move on to our second public hearing. I'll recognize our clerk, please.
Consider adoption of local law number 3 of 2020 entitled Wireless Communication Facilities. The legal notice was published in the Penfield Post on June 25th, 2020, posted on the town website and town clerk bulletin board. No postcards were mailed due to this being a townwide action.
Great, thank you very much. I'll next recognize Mr. Horowitz, and I'll ask Mr. Horowitz, our town attorney, is this properly before the board?
Yes, it is.
All right, thank you, Mr. Horowitz. I do appreciate it. I think we have Katie Teitler that is going to be joining us to at least listen into this discussion. She's from Verizon. I see her there. Welcome, Katie. Good to see you. And is Josh going to be joining in as well? All right, there's Josh. Welcome to the two of you. All right, let's get started. There's been a lot of work that has been done on this. I'm going to recognize Jim Costello, our Development Services Director, to give us a little bit of an overview. And certainly at any point, Town Attorney Dick Horowitz, who was the co-author of this particular local law. And with that, Mr. Costello, if you will, please.
Thank you, Mr. LaFountain. Tonight's public hearing addresses the town's desire to amend Chapter 250, Sections 2-2 with the entitled Definitions, and Section 250-1311 entitled Wireless Communication Facilities. The proposed amendment updates the existing telecommunications ordinance, and will have the same codification within the ordinance itself. The amendment is necessary to address FCC regulations that were adopted in the fall of 2018 to address the propagation of small wireless antennas to support 5G or fifth-generation wireless service that will be provided to the residents of the town of Penfield at some time, probably in the near future. The FCC regulations define what constitutes a material prohibition of personal wireless service, establish presumptively reasonable fees for installation, require safety and aesthetic considerations that may be imposed by local governments be published in advance. And that's also part of tonight's application, is that we address the design manual that was prepared to give developers or carriers the ability to know what they can and can't do, and work with the town to get to that end. It also created new shot clocks or timeframes for applications to be reviewed and approved to install small wireless facilities, 60 days for co-location and 90 days for new structures. The town staff, with the guidance of the town attorney, has developed amendments to the ordinance, which we feel comply with the FCC regulations, while making every effort to protect the health, safety, and general welfare of the community. Small wireless communication facilities are defined as a structure on which antenna facilities are mounted 50 feet or less in height, no more than 10% taller than any surrounding utility structure, not extended to a height of more than 50 feet, or by 10%, whichever is greater, of surrounding utility structures. The new network will provide marked higher speeds and increased capacities to transmit larger quantities of data, which will be more quickly provided than current networks. The biggest issue with 5G technology, and this is one of the reasons why we are amending our ordinance, is that 5G technology its transmission distance is significantly less than existing networks. As a result, it will require the installation of a significant number of antennas or nodes to cover the same area as the current technology, requiring the use of local right-of-ways to produce that service. And that's the big issue for us. The ordinance itself is not going to be modified very much as it relates to existing conditions for the tall towers, the 150-foot towers, and also the satellite dishes that you have at your home. Those will still be the same processes that we use today. The big issue now is that the carriers are interested in installing poles. Generally, poles are called antennas. They're small wireless facilities in the right-of-way, and they can occur in the state, county, and town right-of-ways. Obviously, we're most concerned about the town right-of-ways because, as you know, many of our subdivisions over the last 20, 30 years have underground utilities servicing those subdivisions and not telephone wires or telephone poles above ground. So we're going to be working with the various carriers to ensure that those locations are identified early on so there's no conflict of interest with sanitary or storm utilities within the right-of-way, and they're placed properly and placed in such a way that they blend in with the character of the neighborhood or blend in with existing poles, whatever the case may be. I do have, the town of Penfield actually does have its first pole that it installed on Panorama Trail about a year and a half ago. Let me get there for you. Actually, that's not the one I want. This gives an idea of what they kind of look like. They're not the tall towers that you've seen put up over the last several years. They are actually smaller towers similar to telephone poles. I want to be able to get you there. I'm sorry. That's our... I'm sorry. I'm going to get you there one way or another. Here we go. So on Panorama Trail, just across from the M&T Bank and also on the other side is Home Depot, this tower was installed about a year and a half ago. It was intended and designed to be equal to and similar to the tower that's just down the street from it that's served by RG&E. And this is what it looks like here. This is one of many designs. I have several. Some of them are not telephone poles. Some of them are on existing light poles, that type of thing. But you can see it is in keeping with, and you really wouldn't know the difference if you had been driving by it to know whether it was a telephone pole or a repeater cell or a small wireless facility. So these are the things we're looking at because we know that over a period of time there are going to be many, many such poles installed throughout the community to address the 5G technology that's impending before us. See if I can pull up a couple of other ones for you just to give you an idea. Technology is never what you want it to be when you need it. Here's something you might see on a more regular basis. These are a little more unobtrusive as it relates to the neighborhoods where you have a situation where you have no underground utilities, and this would be the case here. These would be standalone poles that you would see possibly in residential neighborhoods throughout the town over a period of time to serve those areas. A lot of them will probably be installed within the state and county right-of-ways, the larger right-of-ways that serve a larger population at any given time, but they eventually will probably go into the subdivisions as well.
Okay.
Any questions?
All right. So at this point, the board has had an opportunity to take a look at local law number 3, the draft that was prepared for this evening. We've heard a little bit of an overview by Mr. Costello. We've seen some graphics as it relates to those polls that are being proposed. At this point, I'll ask the board, are there any specific questions for either Mr. Costello or Mr. Horowitz on this particular matter?
Mr. Supervisor, I just have one question for probably Mr. Costello. Jim, if you could just highlight for us the approval process when one of these poles are desired in a neighborhood or someplace, and as it relates to the right-of-way, who's all involved, just kind of highlight what the process is.
The process is going to be an administrative process. If the poles meet the criteria set forth in the ordinance, it'll be a situation where a carrier will make an application for a pole to be placed in whatever spot. We will review that area with them to ensure that there's no conflicts with utility installations in place. And if that was the case, then we would work with them to have the pole installed within a reasonable time frame. As I said, we are aware of the fact that there are certain shot clock or time frames that you have to work within. And if you don't do that, then in essence, the pole will go up with or without you. So it gives us the opportunity to work with the carriers to ensure that there's no, there's no degradation of quality of life in those areas in terms of impacts to utilities. And certainly work with them to identify the type of pole that could go in there that would be amenable to the neighborhood. But it's not a situation where they will be going before the board. This is much like what happened back in the 90s when the large cell towers were approved for use throughout the community. You really had to demonstrate that there was a need to relocate it to another location before they were obligated to do so. In this case, they are working with us now to identify locations that serve their needs, yet protect the quality of life for the residents of Penfield in that process.
Okay, so it's regardless whether it's an extension on an existing pole or a new pole, the process is the same.
It is, and for the extensions at the co-location, certainly we would encourage that. The co-locations would probably take less time to approve than possibly a new pole, or in this case, maybe several new poles within one area.
Okay.
The other thing, too, is there are fees associated with this for use of the right-of-way. We will be charging a fee for each pole that goes in, and then there's also a fee if they want to add on to that pole with other, with other cells or antennae. They have given us some recommendations. We have basically taken the recommendations from the FCC as to what they think is fair and equitable for charging fees.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Costello. Thank you, Mr. Ockenden. Other questions, board, for either staff or Town Attorney Horowitz? Debbie?
Yes, thanks, Mr. Supervisor. Mr. Costello, I think, a question for you. So on those fees, is that a one-time fee? It's a yearly fee that they're paying for those poles?
I believe it's a one-time fee. But again, you've got to remember there will be many, many poles throughout the town of Penfield before this is over to accommodate that technology. The problem with the technology is it's very difficult to transmit from one point to another, especially if there's some type of obstruction within the way of the 2 points of interest. They would have to put in numerous poles to get to point B if there were several obstructions to get there. And I know that we have some people from Verizon out with us tonight, and they can probably give you some ideas as to what the issues that they're going to have to wrestle with to get to where they need to be.
So we'll give our friends from Verizon, if they would like to address in just a moment. I want to get through any town board comments, and then I'll open it up to the public, and we'll go from there. So town board, any further questions at this point that you'd like to ask Mr. Costello or Mr. Horowitz? Okay, so at this time, I would recognize, and I'd like to qualify the individuals, Katie and Josh, that are on with Verizon. Verizon has a general interest in this application, as I'm sure other carriers may have. However, Verizon has been somewhat on the forefront of this to meet with the town, make the town aware of different things, ask questions, provide information as requested. So they are an interested party. They are not currently making any applications this evening. They're only there to either clarify some information or add some additional information from a technology standpoint for the board and for the public watching this meeting. So at this time, I would recognize Josh or Katie if you would like to address the board on this matter.
Hi, thank you. Can you all hear me okay? I just want to make sure my
We can.
audio's working. Okay, great. Good evening. So I'm Katie Tyler. I'm we're on the Verizon network real estate team in upstate New York. So I'll give you a very brief, context for why Verizon is interested in deploying small cells here across upstate New York and in your community. So really just very simply, in order to stay ahead of the growing demand on our 4G network and really to prepare upstate for 5G. Verizon's been installing small cells for a few years now. They're similar to the large cell towers that you're used to, as Mr. Costello mentioned, in that they include an antenna and radio equipment, but they're much smaller in size and they cover a much smaller area. They're so small, in fact, that it's why we're able to mount them on structures in your public rights of way, including streetlights and utility poles. And Jim showed you a few great examples of types of poles that we would potentially look to go on. Typically, our first option would be to look at co-locating on existing poles. If we have to place a new pole, in the example, if we have to go into a residential neighborhood where utilities are underground, Verizon has to place that pole at its own expense. So, of course, our preference is to hope, find poles that are already there for us in the right of way that we could potentially attach to. So in upstate New York, Verizon holds about 40 to, I think the latest number was maybe 45% of the market share. So as you can imagine, we've got quite a lot of traffic to keep up with on our network. We're also seeing about 50 to 60% growth in data usage on our network year over year. And honestly, I'd like to see where those numbers are today, since so many people now are working from home and using up even more bandwidth on our network. So really we're just trying to keep up with that demand and exponential growth. And to do that, we're able to install small cells in, hotspot areas, if you will, to help create more capacity and balance out the traffic. Unlike the cell towers that you're used to, we often need to strategically build a number of these small cells throughout a community to offload capacity, as Mr. Costello mentioned. For that reason, it's imperative that you have a modern and streamlined review process in place, and that you establish the right framework that really strikes a good balance in encouraging wireless technology for your residents, while also, maintaining your right to oversee the public right of way. While Verizon, while we're making, sure that your residents are as connected as they need to be, we also live and work here in these communities, and we want to maintain the character of our neighborhoods. A great way to maintain a certain aesthetic is to put design guidelines in place so that we can find that right balance between, say, the utility company who may own the poles that we're looking to attach our equipment to, and also making sure that we're adhering to your preferences, to the extent that they're feasible, of course. We've had a chance to review the proposed design manual for small cells, and we've provided a few bits of feedback, but we're generally agreeable. It looks really good. We've also had some time to review the draft code amendment that Mr. Horowitz put together and provide some feedback there as well. But really, it looks to be in really good shape, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have on it, the small cell design manual or the proposed fee schedule, or any general questions about small cells that you might have. And my colleague Josh Doolin, he's an RF engineer for us. If any of your questions are more technically inclined, he might be the right person for those. So happy to open it up to any questions.
Okay, great. Thank you. And I'll just take this opportunity to thank you and Verizon for providing input and feedback. We currently have that in the hands of staff, our town attorney, and counsel to our town attorney to review that. So thank you for taking that initiative to provide input and feedback. So at this time, I'll ask the board, we've got a couple of local experts in and around. So in addition to any questions for Mr. Costello, Mr. Horowitz, do you have any comments, questions for Verizon at this point? Again, recognizing they do not have an application with the town at this time. They're an interested party and attempting to provide some technical input if needed or necessary. So I'll ask the board, any questions for Katie or Josh?
Josh, I just have one question. It's probably not completely relevant, but pardon me for asking it, just because my curiosity will keep me up tonight. The way this works, is this like this pole that's on the picture right now, Mr. Costello's screen, if you can see it, is that just receiving a signal from a large tower, taking it and retransmitting it out? Is that really how this technology works?
No, generally that tower that you're seeing right there would be fed by power as well as fiber from an underground conduit. And so the fiber will be running from that pole back to one of our main switches. There is, I know some of the other carriers, and there is other technologies out there where something like that could function as just a repeater. But at this point, what we're looking to deploy is generally a full powered radio there that is hardlined back to the main network.
All right, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Josh. Thank you, Bob. Other questions or comments for staff, attorney, or a couple of our experts that are on the line?
Can I ask a question of probably Josh? So the receivers that are like currently now on the water tower, some other larger venues, would those do those just automatically stay? We continue to use them. These new ones are in addition to what we already have in our community, would have in our community?
Correct. So what we call macros, that's what you think of when you see the 150-foot tower or one of those water towers. That's what's providing our existing service. And as the usage grows, one of those sites can only provide so much data to so many people. And so once it hits a certain point, we need to add another one. And the options are to add another big tower or to go with something smaller. You hit a point where you can't really add any more big towers. They start interfering with each other and they don't provide any benefit to the network. So at that point, you start to look for these smaller cells that are closer to the users. They're only going to cover a small segment of the population, and they just take that one small section and take care of that by itself. And that removes that load from the wider network and lets those big towers continue to cover fast moving traffic or more distant users in less dense areas.
Thanks for that clarification. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Debbie. Additional questions or comments, board? Okay. I do not see any calls coming in at this time. I'm going to ask Mr. Costello or Mr. Horowitz, is there any additional information that you would like to add to the record this evening that we haven't already seen in our draft documents that we've received or we've heard this evening that you believe is important to this application?
Not at this time, Mr. Supervisor.
Okay.
I do not.
All right, thank you. I'll ask the board, do you have any additional questions or comments either for staff or the experts that we have on the line? All right, now I'll ask the Verizon folks, any additional input that you would like to provide the board that you haven't already addressed this evening or submitted for review as part of your comments for the design manual and for the local law?
No, I don't have anything further.
Okay. Thank you for both of you joining us tonight. Let me talk about next steps, and I'll do one last check to see if we have any call-ins. Our next step is that because of the fact that this is a local law and the revisions made to it, I'll look to hold this public hearing open for a week, so until next Wednesday. That way, anyone that either couldn't call in or are taking a look at this broadcast at a later date, if they have any questions, input, or feedback, they have the opportunity to bring that forward. I'll ask that information be in by 5 p.m. next Wednesday. The next opportunity that the town board will have to discuss this matter will be next Wednesday at our work session. And at that time, board will have an opportunity to come back to staff and ask the staff if they need any additional information, if there were any additional comments that were made by our residents that were to come in. And from there, then the board will discuss what the next steps are. That will be another Zoom meeting, and you're welcome, Katie and Josh, to be on that. If for some reason you can't, I would ask that you stay in contact with Mr. Costello, and he can keep you updated as to where we are. Okay, one last check. I do not see any other calls coming in or anyone asking to speak on behalf of this application. Therefore, I will declare this public hearing closed. Thank you to everyone that participated. And again, further interest, please tune in next week or stay in contact with Mr. Costello. Thank you, Katie. Thank you, Josh. Okay, we'll move on to the next item on our agenda. That is communications and announcements. And at this time, I will start with Councilwoman Draw and ask, are there any communications announcements you may have?
No, Mr. Supervisor. Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you. I'll ask our town clerk, any communications or announcements this evening?
Just one, that the passport night that was scheduled for July 30th has been canceled. We do not have a new date as of yet.
Okay, so as we get more information and as things like that open up, I'm sure we'll be discussing that at a future town board meeting. And of course, you can log in at penfield.org for any updates as well. Okay, I'll recognize Councilman Ockenden. Any communications announcements this evening, sir?
Mr. Supervisor, I do have one item I'd just like to mention. I was in contact with a resident from Huntington Meadow regarding the recent sidewalk project that was completed there and how pleased they were with the installation of the sidewalk and the improved safety it's going to provide for their neighborhood. It was noted how much these sidewalks are already being used, so that's great. However, they did mention to me, they informed me of some work that was done by the contractor, or maybe it was a subcontractor, that was not exactly the desired outcome with some of the neighbors' driveways. I did stop and take a look there as well, and I could see the concerns that were raised. I want to acknowledge that town engineer Mark Valentine did set up a meeting with the contractor. They met there, and basically the contractor has assured Mark that the issues will be rectified at no expense to the town in the very near future. So again, I just wanted to now acknowledge that, and thanks to Mark for taking care of that and also making contact with the neighbors that were affected by that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ockenden. I appreciate that. That's a great point, and thank you for your follow-up on that. All right, I'll recognize next Mr. Moore. Any communications announcements tonight, sir?
No announcements tonight. Thank you.
All right. And last but not least, Councilwoman Cole. Any communications or announcements, Linda?
No announcements.
Okay, very good. Thank you. We'll move on to public participation. One of two opportunities at this time and again at the end of our agenda. You can do that several ways. There used to be 3 ways, but until we are able to meet again live time, we'll have to settle for the call-in at 340-8771, or you can log on at penfield.org. And so I'll just give a minute, and we'll see if we have any calls that come in. I will indicate that the Penfield Public Library opened their doors this past Monday. They've been closed since early COVID days. And I'm happy to report that the number of the residents that have come to the library are glad to be back. The library staff are doing a great job of making sure that physical distancing, masking, but making sure that everyone is safe and still getting the great experience at the Penfield Library. So we're glad that they're open back up, and we look forward to seeing more faces as time goes on and we see a little bit more back to normal. So with that, I don't see any additional phone calls coming in. Again, there will be a second opportunity to address the board on any matter at the end of the agenda. We'll move on to additions and deletions. I'll recognize Mr. Moore.
Mr. Supervisor, I have one addition to tonight's agenda. It is Resolution 141, entitled Authorization for Supervisor to Sign a Contract for Security Services. Thank you.
Thank you.
I second that.
Thank you, Linda. It's been moved and seconded. That will come at the end of the agenda under new business, item number 141. Thank you. We will move on to minutes. Before us and in our hands are the minutes of June 17th, 2020. I would recognize a motion of approval for those minutes.
Move that the minutes, oh, sorry. Jumped it. Okay, second.
So I have a motion by Councilwoman Cole. Is there a second, Councilman Ockenden?
Yes, second.
All right. It's been moved and seconded. At this time, I'll ask, are there any discussions, comments regarding those minutes? Okay, seeing none from any of the board members, I'll ask the clerk to please call the roll of the June 17th, approval of the June 17th, 2020 minutes.
Draw,
Aye.
Cole,
Aye.
LaFountain,
Aye.
Moore,
Aye.
Ockenden.
Aye.
5 ayes.
All right, thank you. We'll move on to petitions. I'll ask, has the town board, the town attorney, or the town clerk received any petitions since our last meeting?
If not,
Okay, everyone has acknowledged no petitions have come in. Thank you. That will take us to resolution by function. And this evening, it's the Andy Moore Law and Finance Show. And I'll ask the clerk to please start with Resolution 129.
Authorization to settle Northwest Savings Bank tax certiorari proceedings.
Moved.
Sorry, second.
Sure. Whereas Southwest Savings Bank heretofore commenced proceedings against the assessor and the Board of Assessment Review and other respondents for review of the assessment for years 2018 through 2019 for the premise located at 475 Plank Road within the town of Penfield. Whereas negotiations have been held between the town attorney and the attorney for the petitioner in an attempt to settle a compromise to the petitioner's claim. Whereas such negotiations, tentative agreements have been reached between all parties and the terms of the proposed settlement subject to the approval of the town board and to the approval of the Supreme Court of the State of New York. Whereas due upon consideration of all facts and circumstances, the town board finds that the proposed compromise and settlement is fair and reasonable. Therefore, be it resolved that the proposed settlement of the tax certiorari proceedings brought on by Northwest Savings Bank for the tax roll years 2018 through 2019 be hereby approved. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Further questions by the board on this resolution? Seeing no further discussion, a roll call vote, please.
Draw,
Aye.
Cole,
Aye.
LaFountain,
Aye.
Moore,
Aye.
Ockenden.
Aye.
5 ayes. Authorization to settle RCM Elmwood LLC and RJM Elmwood LLC tax certiorari proceedings.
Moved.
Second.
Whereas RCM Elmwood LLC and RJM Elmwood LLC heretofore commenced proceedings against the assessor and the Board of Assessment Review and other respondents for the review of the assessments of years 2015 through 2019 for property located at 2171 5 Mile Line Road in Penfield. Whereas negotiations have been held between the town attorney and the attorney for the petitioner. Whereas after each negotiation, or after such negotiation, tentative agreements have been reached between all parties on the terms of the proposed settlement, subject to the approval of the town board and the approval of the Supreme Court of the State of New York. Whereas upon due consideration of all facts and circumstances, the town board finds that the proposed compromise and settlement is fair and reasonable and should be approved. Therefore, be it resolved that the proposed settlement of the tax certiorari proceedings brought by RCM Elmwood LLC and RJM Elmwood LLC tax for the tax roll years 2015 through 2019 be and hereby are approved. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? Seeing no further question, I'll ask for a roll call vote, please.
Draw,
Aye.
Cole,
Aye.
LaFountain,
Aye.
Moore,
Aye.
Ockenden.
Aye.
5 ayes. Authorization to settle 2250 Penfield Road, Hidden Creek D LLC, tax certiorari proceedings.
Moved.
Second.
Whereas Hidden Creek DE LLC heretofore commenced proceedings against the assessor and the Board of Assessment Review and other respondents for the review of the assessment for the years 2017 through 2019 for the property located at 2250 Penfield Road in Penfield. Whereas negotiations have been held between the town attorney and the attorneys for the petitioner in an attempt to settle the compromise. Whereas such negotiations and tentative agreements have been reached between all parties in terms of the proposed settlement, subject to the approval of the town board and the approval of the Supreme Court of the State of New York. Whereas upon due consideration of all facts and circumstances, the town board finds that the proposed compromise and settlement is fair and reasonable and should be approved. Therefore, be it resolved that the proposed settlement of the tax certiorari proceedings brought on by Hidden Creek DE LLC for the tax roll years 2017 through 2019 be and hereby are approved. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll ask the board further discussion. See no further discussion. A roll call vote, please.
Draw,
Aye.
Cole,
Aye.
LaFountain,
Aye.
Moore,
Aye.
Ockenden.
Aye.
5 ayes. Authorization for settlement and release agreement with Spectrum Northeast LLC, locally known as Charter Communications.
Moved.
Second.
Be it resolved that the town board of the town of Penfield hereby authorizes a supervisor to sign a settlement and release agreement with Spectrum Northeast LLC, also known as Charter Communications. Said agreement is to be in form and substance acceptable to the Penfield town attorney. Thank you.
Thank you. Discussion. Seeing no further discussion, a roll call vote, please.
Draw,
Aye.
Cole,
Aye.
LaFountain,
Aye.
Moore,
Aye.
Ockenden.
Aye.
5 ayes. Authorization for supervisor to sign a license and hold harmless agreement to allow a portion of a fence within a storm sewer easement at 217 Hampton Way.
Moved.
Second.
Be it resolved that the town board of the town of Penfield hereby authorizes supervisor to sign a license and hold harmless agreement with Eric Bonacci and Megan K. Christopher, owners of the property at 217 Hampton Way, to permit a portion of a fence to encroach in a storm sewer easement to the town of Penfield, located at 217 Hampton Way, in a form and substance acceptable and agreeable to the Penfield town attorney. Thank you.
Thank you. Discussion. Seeing no further discussion, a roll call vote, please.
Draw,
Aye.
Cole,
Aye.
LaFountain,
Aye.
Moore,
Aye.
Ockenden.
Aye.
5 ayes. Authorization for supervisor to sign an agreement with the New York State Thruway Authority to sell Easy Pass tags in the town clerk's office.
Moved.
Second.
Whereas the town of Penfield would like to provide another service to Penfield residents. Now therefore be it resolved that the town board of the town of Penfield authorizes Penfield Town Clerk Amy Steckloff to sell Easy Passes tags in the clerk's office here at the town hall. Be it further resolved that the town supervisor be and hereby is authorized to enter into an agreement with the State of New York Thruway Authority to sell Easy Pass tags provided and provide all legal requirements are compiled with. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I
Amy.
was just going to say that I think this is going to be a great service to provide to our residents, especially with the way things are in New York State. Thruway Authority, they're going to be expecting more and more people to have Easy Pass, and there's other options that they'll be having, but the Easy Pass is going to be best for all, and I'm looking forward to providing this service to our residents.
All right, thank you. Mr. Moore?
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. I'd like to personally thank Town Clerk Amy Steckloff and also Town Councilman Bob Ockenden for thinking proactively on this initiative. I agree with everything that Town Clerk Steckloff just said. As more and more people start using the Thruway through the Easy Pass system, I think that this is going to be a benefit for town residents, a very efficient simple way to come to the town hall, get your easy pass, put it in your car, and go about your way. So greatly appreciate you, Ms. Steckloff, bringing this forward, and Councilman Bob Ockenden for your leadership in developing and drafting this resolution with the town attorney. Thank you.
Okay, further discussion? Seeing no further discussion, roll call vote, please.
Draw,
Aye.
Cole,
Aye.
LaFountain,
Aye.
Moore,
Aye.
Ockenden.
Aye.
5 ayes. Budget transfer in the general fund.
Moved.
Second.
Whereas the comptroller requires a transfer of taxes and assessment accounts due to taxes due for 190 Stonledge Way deeded to the town in late 2019. Whereas the town board desires to have an up-to-date budget in relation to current income and expenditures. Now be it resolved that the following 2020 budget be transferred and approved from regular contingency in the amount of $3,773 to taxes and assessments in the amount of $3,773. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Further discussion? Seeing no further discussion, a roll call vote, please.
Draw,
Aye.
Cole,
Aye.
LaFountain,
Aye.
Moore,
Aye.
Ockenden.
Aye.
5 ayes. Setting a public hearing for the establishment of Forest Ridge Subdivision Special Improvement District.
Moved.
Second.
Whereas a written petition has been received by the town board, duly dated and verified to contain the required signatures, and having been presented to and filed with the town board of the town of Penfield in Monroe County for the establishment of the Forest Ridge Subdivision Special Improvement District. Whereas the proposed improvement shall consist of maintenance of all public areas and betterments such as stormwater treatment areas, subdivision identification signs, and other such items deemed appropriate within the Forest Ridge subdivision that benefits solely the residents that live there. Therefore, whereas the boundaries of said improvement district and general layout of facilities within the shown map and plan attached to this resolution to be made part of said petition, which is filed with the office of the Penfield Town Clerk. Whereas the cost of the installation and improvements associated with the Forest Ridge Subdivision Special Improvement District shall be borne on the petitioners of said district. Now therefore be it resolved that the town board of the town of Penfield shall hold a public hearing at the Penfield Town Hall on August 5th, 2020 at 7 p.m. on said date to consider said petition and to hear all persons interested in the subject thereof and concerning the same. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion? So this is one of 3 resolutions that we'll have for this particular subdivision. The next 2 as it relates to intensified sidewalk and a consolidated sanitary sewer. So with this particular one for special improvement districts, seeing no further discussion, I'll ask for a roll call vote for this resolution.
Draw,
Aye.
Cole. Cole?
It's an aye.
Okay, thank you.
LaFountain,
Aye.
Moore,
Aye.
Ockenden.
Aye.
5 ayes. Setting a public hearing for the establishment of Forest Ridge Subdivision Intensified Sidewalk District, District Number 19.
Moved.
Second.
Whereas the town of Penfield sidewalk policy requires sidewalks within all new subdivisions. Whereas the developer of the Forest Ridge subdivision located on Jackson Road has provided a petition for the formation of said district. Now therefore be it resolved that the town board of the town of Penfield shall hold a public hearing at the Penfield Town Hall on August 5th, 2020 at 7 p.m. on said date to consider the adoption of the Forest Ridge Intensified Sidewalk District number 19.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Further discussion? Seeing no further discussion, roll call vote, please.
Draw,
Aye.
Cole,
Aye.
LaFountain,
Aye.
Moore,
Aye.
Ockenden.
Aye.
5 ayes. Setting a public hearing for the establishment of an extension number 60 to the Penfield Consolidated Sanitary Sewer District for the Forest Ridge subdivision.
Moved.
Second.
Whereas a written petition has been received by the Penfield Town Board, duly dated and verified to contain the required signatures, having been presented and filed with the Town Board in the Town of Penfield for the establishment of Extension Number 60 to the Penfield Consolidated Sanitary Sewer. Whereas the improvement proposed consists of sewer pipes, lines, hardware, and all necessary apertures thereto for the purposes of constructing said sewer lines. Whereas the entire cost of the improvement to be constructed in said sewer district extension should be borne by the developer of said extension. Now therefore be it resolved that the Town Board of the Town of Penfield shall hold a public hearing at the Penfield Town Hall on August 5th, 2020 at 7 p.m. on said date to consider the petition and to hear all persons interested in the subject thereof and concerning the same. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion on this resolution? Again, we'll have 3 public hearings on this particular subdivision on the 5th of August. Seeing no further discussion, I'd ask for a roll call vote, please.
Draw,
Aye.
Cole,
Aye.
LaFountain,
Aye.
Moore,
Aye.
Ockenden.
Aye.
5 ayes. Authorization for supervisor to sign a contract with Leader Professional Services, Inc. to conduct Phase 1 and Phase 2 environmental assessments and an asbestos survey at 1407 5 Mile Line Road.
Moved.
Second.
Whereas the Charles Bird family proposes to donate property at 1407 5 Mile Line Road consisting of 5.9 acres to the Town of Penfield. Whereas the Town of Penfield requires that said property be environmentally audited prior to accepting donation to ensure there are no environmental concerns associated with the property. Whereas the Town of Penfield requires quotes from 3 firms to conduct a Phase 1 and Phase 2 environmental site assessment and asbestos survey. Whereas Leader Professional Services has provided the lowest quote meeting or exceeding the specifications to conduct the Phase 1 or Phase 2 environmental site assessments and asbestos survey for subject property at a cost not to exceed $4,500. Now therefore be it resolved that the Town Board authorizes the supervisor to sign the contract with Leader Professional Services to conduct this Phase 1 and Phase 2 environmental site assessment. Thank you.
Thank you. Discussion.
Mr. Supervisor, real quick, I would like to thank you for your leadership on this issue. I know when you brought it before the town board a few weeks ago, in conversations, it's something that we endorsed due to your leadership. This town is always continuing to expand its green space and open space initiatives, 5.6 acres, assuming that the Phase 1 and Phase 2 come out clean. We will be adding almost 6 acres of land to our green space, open space initiatives that we continue to expand on here in the town of Penfield. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Further discussion? Seeing no further discussion, I would ask for a roll call vote.
Draw,
Aye.
Cole,
Aye.
LaFountain,
Aye.
Moore,
Aye.
Ockenden.
Aye.
5 ayes. Setting a public hearing to consider amendments to Chapter 250 of the zoning ordinance entitled Residential Chickens.
Moved.
Second.
Whereas the town board desires to amend 250-5.1-G entitled Residential Chickens of the Penfield Town Code to consider permitting chickens on properties within certain residential zoning districts in the town. Whereas the town board, acting as lead agency pursuant to requirements of Part 617.6 of the State Environmental Quality Review Act, hereby declares itself lead agency on this matter. Now be it resolved that the town board of the town of Penfield shall hold a public hearing at the Penfield Town Hall on August 5th, 2020 at 7 p.m. on said date to consider said matter and to hear all persons interested in this residential chicken code of the Penfield Town Code, more particularly described in Attachment A, attached hereto and made a part hereof. Be it further resolved that a copy of this resolution will be certified with the Penfield Town Clerk. Thank you.
Thank you. This time I'd like to recognize Councilman Ockenden for a couple of comments on this matter.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. just want to say I'm extremely happy that we're to the next step, which is moving to a public hearing on August the 5th. And I encourage and ask all those that I've had contact with over the last month or so on this topic to please participate in that. Again, August 5th. Look forward to that evening. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Mr. Ockenden. I'll ask any further comments on this particular resolution. Okay, seeing no further comments, I'll ask for a roll call vote, please.
Shaw,
Aye.
Cole,
Aye.
LaFountain,
Aye.
Moore,
Aye.
Ockenden.
Aye.
5 ayes.
All right, thank you. This brings us to old business. Any old business to come before the board this evening? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to new business, and I'll recognize the clerk for the new business resolution.
Authorization for supervisor to sign a contract for security services.
Moved.
Second.
Be it resolved that the town board of the town of Penfield hereby authorizes a supervisor to sign a contract for security services to provide personnel resources to the town. Said services are necessary to cope with COVID-19 pandemic and supports public safety in reopening various town facilities. The contract shall be in the form and substance acceptable to the Penfield town attorney.
Thank you. Further discussion on this matter? Okay, seeing no further discussion, I'd ask for a roll call vote, please.
Shaw,
Aye.
Cole,
Aye.
LaFountain,
Aye.
Moore,
Aye.
Ockenden.
Aye.
5 ayes.
All right, thank you. This brings us to our second public participation. You can do that one of two ways. So you can log on at penfield.org. You can call in at 340-8771. I'm checking my computer screen right now, but I'm going to give a moment for those that may wish to call in to comment on any matter. I would like to inform our audience that last evening we held our first concert at the amphitheater. It was a small group. I'm pleased to say that everyone in attendance did a wonderful job of masking, physical distancing, and we had hand sanitizing tables available. And I'm pleased to report that it went very, very well. A small group of approximately 60 people joined in to see this concert. We did a debrief this morning, and what we have said is that we will go week to week on our concerts if everything continues to go well with the openings and everyone continues to do the proper things when getting together. We'll continue to hold those concerts. So Paulson and Baker is next week. That's a family, kids and parents group to entertain our youngest residents of the town. And we're hoping for another evening like last night, beautiful weather, that folks can come out and safely enjoy that concert. I see no calls coming in at this time, and there being no further business to come before the board this evening. The July 15th, 2020 legislative session of the town board stands adjourned at 8:04 p.m. I'd like to thank everyone that participated this evening. I'd also like to thank our technology gurus in the basement for making all of this happen, to bring all of this information and the Zoom meetings and everything to all of our residents. We look forward to seeing you at our next meeting, which is our work session on the 22nd and our legislative session on August 5th. Thank you very much. Have a great evening. Be well and be safe.